I'm Ted Myers with the Cognitive Portfolio, and today I have with me Dan Zakon, founder of MintyBrain. It's great to have you with us, Dan.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself before we jump into MintyBrain?
Yeah, so right now I'm a senior at the University of Michigan. I'm studying computer science, and after college, I'll be working full-time on my company, which is MintyBrain. At a high level, we're building educational video games to help kids improve at and fall in love with math and STEM subjects.
Awesome, man. I'd love to hear a little bit more about life at Michigan. What's it like to be an entrepreneur there? Are you pretty involved in that community and the computer science community?
Yeah, what's been really awesome is that there has been a ton of support for people with ideas, for people who want to start companies at Michigan. There's a ton of different organizations. To shout a few out, actually don't even need to shout them out. There's a bunch of great organizations within Michigan Ross, and also within the School of Education. There's this program called Learning Levers, which has been a huge help, and also just competitions. There's the Michigan Business Challenge, which I recently found out I'm moving on to the finals in that. So through all these things, there's been a lot of support in terms of developing me and my business knowledge, because I come from a computer science background, and just financially making it feasible for students to work on their ideas after college.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Congrats on the pitch competition. That sounds really exciting. What is the reward for that? Will that be a funding round?
Yeah, so the reward maximum you could get is like $25K, which doesn't sound like a ton, but it actually does make a huge difference for entrepreneurs coming out of college who aren't going to have an immediate salary, but also just being able to have another stamp of validation and being able to pitch the idea in front of a lot of potential investors. All that stuff ends up being really valuable, and it's kind of like a snowball effect. The more of these things you win, the more likely other people will be to invest in you.
Makes sense. Sounds like you're really taking advantage of all the resources there. Sounds really exciting. So on to MintyBrain, how did you come up with the idea, and, what kind of experiences have you had both at Michigan and, some side projects that have really led you to this idea?
Yeah, so I actually started coding in the beginning of high school, and I was making video games as a way to teach myself how to code. And through that, I ended up building game after game and started making this type of video game in college called hyper casual. And the goal of hyper casual is basically to get the user to release as much dopamine from their brain as possible in as short a time as possible. And there are these companies who have kind of got this down to a science. They run these massive tests and accumulate a huge amount of data to basically determine which game is going to be a hit game. So if you've ever been scrolling through Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat and you see random ads for these games that look really simple and cheap to produce, but they kind of look like, oh, that could be fun, and you've probably downloaded them. That type of game is called hyper casual. And it's basically just turning engagement psychology on us, the users, and getting people to engage with their phone or these games as much as possible. So I was doing that for about several years. I've been making games for 8 years, and through all of this experience, I had the thought that, like, you don't necessarily have to be using all these tactics of engagement psychology and this data analysis process to be engaging people with something that's kind of like a waste of time or kind of useless. You don't need to have these things be purely entertainment. What if we could engage kids with something that's actually beneficial to them, which is education? And so I started talking about the idea and started building some prototypes, and eventually this kind of turned into like a full-fledged thing that I'm doing, which is just taking a math concept and building sort of like a really satisfying tactile puzzle around that concept, where to solve the puzzle, you actually have to solve the math problem at hand, or engage with the math concept. And so it's taking the idea of engagement and how do we get people to interact with these systems, but also making it so that they're interacting with something that'll actually be useful for them in the long term.
Yeah, makes sense. So do you feel that gamification has a growing role in education? And Do you feel that, especially now in today's extremely virtual world and even, some virtual learning, do you feel that that really has a value add in today's, competitive, digital world?
Yeah, definitely. I think gamification is kind of this buzzword that gets tossed around a lot that kind of encompasses a lot of things. And I think there's definitely gamification that works, but there's also gamification that doesn't work. And I don't necessarily think the answer is to just gamify the entire world. Like, not everything needs to be a game. For instance, like, I don't know that Robinhood needs to shoot confetti out when you make a trade, because like investing is a really serious thing. I don't know if we should like gamify that necessarily. In education, there are a lot of things that work really well, but the common theme with any gamification that works well is that it intrinsically motivates the students to do something. So gamification in terms of like grading systems, I think doesn't work so well. It's like, well, if you do this and that, it'll boost you to an A or whatever. I think that's kind of like thinking about gamification in the wrong way, where it's focused on this extrinsic reward, which is your grade or your GPA, which is really not like internally motivating the student to be like, I want to do this because it's cool, because I want to learn something, because I want to expand my knowledge. So I think all the gamification that really interests me and that I'm really focused on are how can we bring educational or STEM concepts into a new context where these concepts are really meaningful in that context. Like, how can I turn math and engineering and physics and chemistry into immersive games and simulations where people will actually want to go to the next level and want to keep playing, because the more they play, the more they learn. And that's an awesome feeling that you can kind of unlock with gamification.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a lot of STEM subjects. I know you've started out your first product with math. Is there a reason why math, is that your STEM background, or do you feel that those subjects are more conducive to learning in a gaming environment?
So there's a couple of reasons. One, math kind of is the backbone of all STEM. Like, mathematics is the language of the universe. You need to have a good grip on math if you want to move on to any STEM subject. So oftentimes, not oftentimes, every time there's a good physicist or a good computer scientist or a good chemist, they have to have a good solid background in math. The other thing is every student in America and probably worldwide has to learn math in their elementary school curriculum. So from a business standpoint, it makes sense to start with sort of the broadest market in terms of everyone's learning this. Everyone could benefit from learning math. Then the other thing is like, it can be easier to encode math as a game because the manipulation of numbers is a really natural thing. Whereas it's a little bit harder to build like a game for creative writing, for instance, or for a subject that's less actually concrete and there's less visualizations for it.
Yeah, makes sense. So you foresee, jumping into other subjects, taking advantage of some, those tangential, math, build off of subjects. Are those the next goals, or do you foresee it kind of expanding into older classes and older grades, getting into more complex math?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think what we want to do is expand in all those directions. We want to expand vertically, certainly, to bring our content to more grade levels in mathematics, but we also want to expand laterally to offer more subjects. So maybe the next subject we start to go into is physics or biology or the natural sciences. And then eventually we'd want to expand geographically too. Right now we're just offering content in the US. We'd like to translate our games into different languages and stuff. But the answer is I want to expand to all those areas. And the question that remains to be answered is what sequence do I want to do that in? And I think that's something that we'll figure out as time goes on.
Sure. Yeah. Limited opportunities, limited resources definitely need to be tactical about how you approach those. Would love to ask, a little bit about how the two come together, the gaming and the education. Is that something that, your team reflects when thinking about these games? Are you starting with the underlying educational concept, or are you starting with, a game and layering in on top learning? Tell me a little bit more about your process.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've been working with um, this woman named Dr. Amber Willis. She's been a curriculum advisor for MintyBrain, and she's extremely helpful in taking the Common Core curriculum, which is like the predominant math curriculum in the US, and looking at each concept and then basically going through, well, how this would be taught in school, the different exercises that students would do in school to learn a particular subject. And then I kind of think about, okay, well, how can we translate this curriculum and sequence of curriculum elements into a sequence of games that reflect those curriculum elements? And so right now we're focusing on what we call like high leverage content areas, where there are certain concepts along the math road that if you don't learn at a certain time, it ends up being really consequential in a bad way later on down the road. For instance, if in third grade you don't get a good handle on fractions, that can be really difficult when you get later down the road in sixth grade and you start having to manipulate fractions regularly with algebra and equations and stuff like that. So we're focusing on really key areas of concepts that if people develop a fluency for them early on, it could be hugely influential in terms of their overall math and STEM trajectory.
Yeah, as a former tutor myself, taught a lot of math. I definitely can speak to, the need to really crack down on those fundamental topics before moving on. And, definitely have seen a real competition for focus recently. And so I definitely, see the value for, definitely certain students, and if not all students, this way to make learning fun. I think a lot of us wish math class was a lot more fun back in the day. I'm really curious. Your games sound really fun. Have kids been playing them? And if so, how has the reaction been? What is some of the feedback you've been getting?
So right now we're in the beta phase of development. So our games aren't publicly released on the App Store yet, or on Google Play, or wherever we're going to release them. We've had some isolated testing, and so far kids really like them. It's actually awesome to do testing with kids because they're so honest about what they feel or think. So originally we were working with this character. I paid this guy in like Ukraine to develop this character that I thought was cute. It was this like little cute blue guy, and we showed it to a bunch of kids, and immediately they were like, I don't like that at all. And so paid a bunch of money for this custom character, and then found this like $20 other little cute dino character and put it in front of kids, and they immediately loved it. So if we just had done a bit of that surveying first, we might have saved money and time on the character. But yeah, it's awesome to get the product in the hands of kids, and very soon, hopefully, we'll be expanding our testing program to a lot more people. If anyone who is watching this is interested, you can go to smartyvillemath.com and request a demo of the alpha, and that'll be a way to get access early to the project before it's fully released. Yeah.
Awesome. Exciting stuff. So, you've mentioned a little bit about where the product is now. Why don't you walk me through a little bit more about where you see kind of Smartyville going, if you have a larger vision for the product, and, just generally, where you want to take MintyBrain to in an ideal world.
Yeah. So first thing we definitely want to get down is making Smartyville and the Smarty series of content kind of the best, most rigorous, and most fun learning platform for math and STEM content in the K through 2 grade band, which is like a really narrow and specific goal. What that means is, yeah, expanding a little bit beyond math. Just if you want your kid or student to learn about anything quantitative, this platform is like a must-have. Like, you can't afford to not buy this for your kids because it's going to give them such a leg up in school in math and STEM subjects. In the future, I don't know what the IP and branding will be. I don't know if we can really keep the Smartyville like kid theme going all the way through like 3 to 5 grade band, and then eventually middle school, high school math. But we're definitely looking to expand to those later grades with similarly fun content. It'll probably just be a bit more mature in theming. And so, yeah, I don't know exactly what that'll look like, but the overarching theme is we're just going to build awesome participatory simulations for learning math and STEM subjects for the K through 12 grades.
Are you ever worried that kids will get too addicted to your games and not want to, go to dinner because they're too busy solving fractions and math equations?
Yeah, so it's actually funny. One of the reasons I pivoted to doing this was because it just didn't feel very good to be making games that people were wasting their time on. It was like my friends would come up to me and be like, dude, I literally played your game for 2 hours. And it's like, feels good for me because it's like, wow, I was able to build something that someone really wanted to spend that much time using. But at the same time, it's like, am I really contributing that much value to society? So I think if a kid were to get addicted to a math game, I think that would be actually a really positive thing. Kids are already on their phones and all their devices so much every day. If any of that screen time can be devoted to learning something that could ultimately have a positive outcome for them and society, that'd be great.
Yeah, totally agree. Definitely, it's funny seeing the shift in my own life, from my mom getting mad at me too when I was on any screens to kind of gearing it more towards positive screen time. So totally feel that sentiment. And I want to commend you on making the shift so early in your career. Impressive how you used your interest in gaming to, learn about something really valuable, computer science, and then, pivot onto using that skill to create a product that provides value to society, man. So I really commend you on that. It's been really fun to learn about. It wouldn't be the modern day and age if I didn't ask. I think it's been about a year since COVID hit. Has that changed, your strategy, your thinking on your products, to given the extremely quick shift to virtual learning?
Yeah, so one of the good things about MintyBrain's general idea is that it's sort of COVID proof. Like selling software in general is a good way to make sure people can still access it, whether they're at home in their pajamas or if the world is all opened up. I think one of the negative impacts COVID has had on us is that it makes it a lot harder to actually get boots on the ground, visiting elementary schools and getting the product in people's hands. So I think, you could imagine a day where COVID doesn't exist and we can actually hand out a bunch of tablets and all walk through some of Smartyville's curriculum in a classroom full of kids. That would be so valuable for our team to learn about our product and how we can make it better. And we just haven't been able to get that opportunity with COVID. But beyond that, I'm just fortunate that I'm not selling hot dogs or something. It's much better to be selling software in a time like this, and it's really unfortunate for anyone who's seriously adversely affected by COVID.
Definitely agree. So what I'm hearing, is strategies mostly unchanged, but a little bit of the, strategy on how you're executing and your ability to gain feedback has been a little bit impacted. But, definitely the digital education world is not a bad place to be in right now.
Yeah, not at all.
And that's a great shift, actually. I'd love to jump in and ask you just a little bit about some of your opinions and thoughts on the edtech industry. Before we do, anything else you'd like to mention about your product or your company?
I think just the one thing is, if you are a parent watching this or a teacher and you want to check out what we're doing, go to smartyvillemath.com and sign up for that alpha. And if you're watching this and you have a background in business or tech or education and you find what I'm saying interesting and want to learn more, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're growing and we're looking for people to engage with. So
very exciting. With that, I'll wrap this up with a couple, high-level questions. I'd love to know if you have any thoughts on the edtech industry as a whole, where it's heading, what it's been like being a founder in the industry, and just, the overall sentiment.
Yeah, so I think education is one of those areas where it's so massive that there's so much opportunity in it, but it's also so massive that it's hard to actually make an impact quickly. And so I think we're seeing a lot of new ed tech companies pop up, given that, I mean, software as a dominant force in our life has only been around for a decade or two. So I think there are massive ways to leverage software to improve the education space, but a lot of it is kind of just emerging right now. I mean, some of the heavy hitters right now in education, like Class Dojo is doing really, really well. IXL has been awesome. There's a lot of big companies, but one of the interesting things you see in China in their ed tech companies that you don't see in the US and our ed tech companies so much is that a lot of their most valuable ed tech companies, I think they have like 5 companies valued over $1 billion that are all working on like these digital tutors that or digital learning services where the point of the product is you go on this virtual thing and you learn. I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the US in the coming years and decades, because one of the great things about interacting with educational content on a computer is that you get immediate feedback, and it's that tight feedback loop that really helps people learn. The other thing is you can use artificial intelligence, machine learning to really personalize experiences to each individual student. So I think we're going to see a lot of systems that sort of unbundle the value proposition of college or of all education and tailor personalized learning content to students at a much bigger scale than, say, having a college class where the maximum enrollment is 400. We could offer some similar course that millions of people could enroll in simultaneously, and it's personalized to them.
Yeah, absolutely exciting time to be in the industry. Do you have any leaders or mentors, either, in the edtech industry or, at Michigan or within your entrepreneurial circle that you look up to and that have been, that North Star for you in your journey?
Certainly. So I have a lot of mentors that have been very, very helpful on the business and educational side. I've been connected to great people through Michigan Ross, through the School of Education at Michigan. There's this guy, Josh Nichols, who's the founder of Crossbraining. He's been really, really interesting to talk to, and his views on where the education system is going. He's had a really long career in education, and he kind of sees how the tide is shifting toward more digital adoption of these learning services. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other people that have been really influential in terms of my personal connections with these mentors. But in terms of like leaders in general, I think like a good people to look at are like Elon Musk type people who take insane ideas and then make them practical. That's someone I really look up to, not in terms of education, but just in terms of his ability to speak about something that sounds delusional at first and say, yeah, we're going to deliver this thing in 2024. And the whole world goes, no way, you're not going to do it. And he might not do it in 2024, but he always delivers on whatever it is that he said he was going to do. I think people need to focus a lot more on like value creation and how do we take some idea that doesn't exist yet and bring it into reality and create something new. So that's what I'm trying to do with MintyBrain, and he's a good sort of North Star leader that I definitely look up to. I know that's a cliche example, but
No, I mean, I think that fits really well. And I'm sure, it helps to have that STEM background when trying to, execute on some of these more outlandishly sounding ideas. Sounds like you're on the right path to making that happen and creating value. I'd like to wrap this up with one final question. What would your advice be, to young coders, young entrepreneurs, even young educators who are really interested in making a difference and creating value? What would you say to the young Dan 5 to 8 years ago, just starting out on this journey?
Yeah, probably just start coding. Just code a lot. Like I think the biggest shift for me when I started coding was that I realized that I didn't need anyone's permission to just start making stuff and start creating stuff. We kind of get taught that knowledge is handed down through the school system. And obviously that's completely changed with YouTube and Reddit and the internet. And now knowledge is just freely available. But specifically with coding, the best way to code is not to just get taught specific data structures and algorithms and things in class. In my view, I think it's just start coding. Find something that, find some project that really interests you and just start writing code and make that a habit. And the more you do that, the more you'll see results and the more proficient you'll get.
Well, Dan, it's been great having you on with us today. Really appreciate all your perspectives on MintyBrain, EdTech industry as a whole, and just what it's like to be a young entrepreneur. Thank you again for being on with us.
Thanks so much, Ted.